Votes and proceedings of Thursday, 19th January 2017, page 1153. Page 1154. Page 1155. Page 1156. Senator Rabiu Kwankwaso, Kano Central.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, my name is Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso, representing Kano Central. I rise to move that the votes and proceedings of Thursday, the 19th of January 2017 be approved. I so move, Mr. President.
Senator Rose Oko from Cross River North.
My name is Rose Oko, Cross River North. I rise to support the motion, the second motion that the votes and proceedings of Thursday, 19th January be adopted. I so move. I so support.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the votes and proceedings of Thursday, 19th January 2017 be approved, say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Votes and proceedings of Thursday, 19th January 2017 is hereby approved. Announcements. Letter from Mr. President. Dear distinguished Senate President, re-nomination of Mr. Ibrahim Magu Mustafa as Executive Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. I write, with reference to your letter number NAS/85/R/01/6, dated 15 December 2016, wherein you conveyed to me the resolution of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, reached on the same Thursday, 15 December 2016, in respect of my earlier request for the confirmation of appointment of Mr. Ibrahim Magu Mustafa, the nominee, as the Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. I have taken due note of the contents of the aforesaid resolution as it concerns the nominee, particularly the conclusion of the distinguished Senate not to confirm the nomination of Mr. Magu due to a security report on the nominee issued by the Department of State Services, DSS, and addressed to the Senate by letter dated 3rd October 2016. Upon receipt of this said resolution, I took administrative steps within the executive arm of government to ensure the speedy clarification of issues relied upon by the Senate in arriving at its decision. These steps included a request for the response of the nominee to the allegations contained in the report out of desire to ensure that the credibility of our anti-corruption campaign is not compromised or called to question. As the distinguished Senate will recall, the prosecution of the anti-corruption war in all aspects of our polity is a program to which my administration has committed itself since our inauguration on May 29, 2015. In undertaking this campaign, we have been guided by the need for urgency, consolidation, and improvement of our present statutory framework for addressing the scourge of corruption in our country, as well as taking the benefit of institutional memory and present capacity in taking the campaign forward. Within the above context, you will agree with me that there is a need to maintain the current momentum and capacity of the EFCC since May 29, 2015. It is in the above context that I therefore request the gracious indulgence of this distinguished Senate to favorably accept my renomination, Mr. Ibrahim Magu Mustafa, for the position of the Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, having received adequate clarification considering the matters relied upon by the Senate in arriving at its decision. Mr. President of the Senate, I make this request for a favorable reconsideration by this distinguished chamber against the background of the critical role of the Senate in driving the anti-corruption campaign of the present administration through a proactive legislative agenda and adequate appropriation support for the important work of agencies such as the AFCC. I use this opportunity to reassure distinguished senators of my determination to continue to pursue synergy between the executive and legislative arms in our common mission to bequeath a more prosperous and value-driven country to generations after us. Please accept, distinguished Senate President, the assurances of my highest consideration and esteem. Yours sincerely, Muhammadu Buhari. Another letter from the President. Dear distinguished Senate President, re-resolution by the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria concerning the humanitarian situation in the Northeast region, particularly in relation to the alleged role of the Secretary to Government of the Federation, Engineer David Babachir Lawal, in the contract implementation regime of the Presidential Initiative for the Northeast PINE. You may recall your letter with reference NATS/8X/R/01/5 dated 15 December 2016 in respect of the Senate's consideration of the report of its ad hoc committee on the mounting humanitarian crisis in the Northeast that conveyed the resolution of the committee as contained in paragraph 1 subsection 8 therein, which reads as follows. Engineer Babachir Lawal, having contravened the provisions of Part 1 of the 5th Schedule of the 1999 Constitution as amended, had breached his oath of office, should resign and be prosecuted by the relevant authority S/Res/075/02/01/16. Following the receipt of your letter, I set up a review team to consider the recommendations from the Senate committee. I have also conducted further investigation based on Engineer Lawal's response to the allegations and issues raised in the Senate's resolution. I have come to the following conclusion that I believe will guide the Senate in the proper review of its interim report and eventual resolution. 1. The report forwarded to the Presidency by the Senate, which informed the decision that Engineer Babachir Lawal should resign and be prosecuted by the relevant authority S/Res/075/02/016 was an interim report as against a final report which ought to have been presented to the Senate in a plenary for adoption as a binding and final report before submission to the Presidency, given the weight of allegations made in the report. 2. The Senate committee set up to investigate the mounting humanitarian crisis in the Northeast comprised of 9 members, namely Senator Oluyemi Tinubu, Senator Mohammed Hassan, Senator Solomon Adiola, Senator Ben Mori Bruce, Senator Tayo Alashadra, Senator Theodore A. Oji, Senator Yara A. Abdullahi, Senator Malam Ali Wakil, and Senator Isaac M. Alpha. 3. The review of the interim report shows that the interim report was only signed by only 3 out of the 9 members, namely Senator Solomon Adiola, Senator Yaya Abdullahi, and Senator Isaac M. Alpha. 4. The signing of the interim report by 3 out of 9 members of the committee makes it a minority report of the Senate committee and not a committee report, being an interim report, thus presenting a challenge for the presidency to determine the weight to attach to the report as currently presented. 5. I've also observed that the Senate ad hoc interim committee report and the votes and proceedings of the Senate have not, in its own right, established that Engineer Babachir Lawal was ever given an opportunity to appear before the committee and defend himself. 6. It is also on record that the company linked to him, Roller Vision Engineering Limited, was also not invited at any time before the committee to defend itself against the allegations which eventually formed the fulcrum of the Senate's case against the company. You are invited to note that non-application of principles of fair hearing by the Senate ad hoc committee is a clear contravention of Section 36(1) of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended, and against all principles of rule of law as enunciated in the Nigerian legal system, as well as the rules of National Assembly committees on handling of public petitions. Consequently, I am of the view that barring other considerations that may arise as a result of subsequent investigation of Engineer Lawal by the interim ad hoc committee, the current report as presented to the presidency in its own right does not meet the principles of fair hearing and compliance with the Senate rules for conduct of investigations in matters relating to abuse of office by public officers. In light of the foregoing, I am not able to approve the recommendation to remove and prosecute Engineer Lawal on the basis of the Senate ad hoc committee report dated 15 December 2016. Please accept the single Senate President the continued assurances of my highest consideration. Signed, Muhammadu Buhari. Notice, Northern let me finish the announcements and then you can take what point of order you want. Announcement again. This is coming from Northern Senators Forum. Notice of meeting. This will inform the members of the Northern Senators Forum that there will be a meeting of the members of the forum as follows. Wednesday, 25th of January 2017. Venue room 231, New Senate Wing. Time 2 p.m. prompt. Signed, Chairman Senator Abdullahi Adamu. Announcement from the Chairman Senate Committee on INEC. This is to inform the distinguished senators you may wish to contribute to the ongoing electoral reform to meet with the Senate Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission INEC today in Committee Room 224, Senate New Building by 2 p.m. prompt. While counting on your attendance, please accept the assurances of the committee's highest regards. Senator Abubakar Kyari. Letter from Senator Ben Mori Bruce to the Senate President. Announcement to be made at the Hallowed Chamber. I, Senator Ben Mori Bruce, seek your approval to have an announcement made on the floor of the Senate. An invitation to my distinguished colleagues in the Senate, the Clerk National Assembly, and the Clerk of the Senate to attend the Silverbird Man of the Year event on Sunday, 19th February 2016, 6 p.m., venue Convention Center of the Eco Hotel and Suite, Victoria Land, Lagos, Nigeria. Announcement. Notice of meeting of the APC caucus meeting. There will be a meeting of the Senate APC caucus on Wednesday, the 25th January 2017, after plenary in hearing room 1. All APC senators are expected to be in attendance. I want to join others to congratulate Senator Philip Gunka, whose birthday was on the 22nd. Wish you many, many more years of good health and happiness. I wish to acknowledge the staff and students of our basic school zone 4, Wuse Abuja, a member of the National Association of Katsina State Students, Katsina State, who are in the gallery to observe Senate proceedings. I wish them a fruitful observation of the Senate proceedings. Leader of the Senate. Point of order, Shehu Sani.
I stand as Senator Shehu Sani, empowered by Order 43, which states thus: by the indulgence of the Senate and the leave of the President of the Senate, a senator may make a personal explanation, though there be no question before the Senate, but no controversial matter may be brought forward, nor may debate arise upon the explanation. The terms of the proposed statement shall be submitted in detail to the President of the Senate when his leave to make it sought. Now, Mr. President, I carefully listened to the letter sent from the Presidency, and I am to make this observation based on this order. First of all, I am the chairman of the Senate Ad hoc Committee on mounting humanitarian crisis in the northeastern part of Nigeria. And it is shocking to me that such a letter can come from the Presidency with such default misinformation and outright distortion. Before me here, I will raise these two issues from that letter. They lied by saying that we didn't invite the SGF. The committee invited the SGF, and the letter was acknowledged by a permanent secretary in the office of the SGF in the person of Mr. Aminu Nebegu, and I have this letter with me as an acknowledgement, and I will submit that to the clerk. And secondly, to make sure that we buttress our point, we made a paid advert in 3 to 4 national dailies. This one was published on the 2nd of December 2016, and the SGF is clearly mentioned as one of those who are invited to come and appear before the committee. So, if they have the intention of simply reaching a predetermined conclusion by covering up on the issues raised by the committee, that is one thing. And then secondly, issues were raised that only 3 members of the committee signed that interim report. That was also a second lie coming from the Presidency. And I have with me a copy of the interim report here, which was initially signed by 7 of the 9 or 10 members of that panel. And I'm going to submit it to the clerk of the Senate. And even if it is 9 and then 3 people sign, we still have a quorum. But here I have 7 people. And then I would say also, I listened to the list of the names that were read, and they omitted the chairman, which is myself. I know I'm not very big in frame, but I believe that my name shouldn't have been omitted. So this shows clearly how the SGF and its minions within the presidency misinformed the president to sign such a letter. This shows the default in that kind of letter. And secondly, I will say this clearly. This letter is a funeral service for the anti-corruption crusade in Nigeria.
Now you're going to a debate. I thought you were doing a personal explanation.
Mr. President, when it comes to fighting corruption in the National Assembly and the judiciary and in the larger Nigerian scene, the presidency uses insecticides, and when it comes to fighting corruption within the presidency, they use deodorant. That is very unfortunate. And I will say this also. I stand by the report of that committee. And it's very clear to us, if we can allow this committee report to be shredded into pieces, then I think it will be in order for us to open all the 138 prisons in this country for both the convicts and the awaiting trial to go scot-free. As far as I'm concerned, on behalf of myself and the committee, what we did was a thorough job. We invited all the companies concerned. We invited the SGF, and he sent us the secretary of the Presidential Initiative on the Northeast. And the secretary testified under oath that he is competent enough. He came with tons and tons of documents, which we went through, and then we came out with our report. And I will say, it is unfortunate that we have a political atmosphere where you have a saintly and angelic presidency and a devilish and evil society. We must, in every respect, fight corruption within the kitchen as we do in this veranda. If we don't do that, then we have been hypocritical. This letter does not in any way reflect the spirit which we espouse as people, fighting to cleanse and fumigate this country of corruption. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Shehu Sani. In line with our rules, there cannot be any further debate on that. Already, I'm sure your committee must be concluding your report by now anyway. So I'm sure those comments you've made, and I'm sure, Senator Shehu Sani, I said I'm sure that you will not be losing anything and ensuring that by the time you conclude your report, the areas of those who have felt that they have an opportunity to appear before you, I'm sure they can appear for you, and you submit your report in due time. Now consider all the points you raised this morning. All right, thank you. Petitions.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Hope Uzodinma. I represent the good people of Imo West. Mr. President, I have a petition from one of my constituents. The petition is just about injustice. This is my constituents. sat for JAM and scored 213 for the course Petroleum Engineering and was not admitted. But in the list of those admitted, they have those who scored 182, 180. So he is seeking the intervention of the Senate for his matter to be revisited.
They're not looking for any judicial. Come and let the petition. Any other petitions? Final Reverend Dinumlai.
Mr. President,
Petition is referred to ethics and privileges. Report back in 2 weeks. Yes, and to Dinumlai.
Mr. President, my very respected colleagues, Dino Melaye, Kogi West Senatorial District. Mr. President, I draw inspiration this morning from Order 43. If I have...
Go ahead.
By the indulgence of the Senate and the leave of the President of the Senate, a senator may make personal explanation, although there may be no question before the Senate, but no controversial matter may be brought forward, nor may debate arise upon the explanation. The terms of the proposed statement shall be submitted in detail to the President of the Senate when his leave to make it is sought. Mr. President, I rise this morning or afternoon in fear and pain on our cyberspace in the last 1 week. Mr. President, I have seen provocative videos and pictures. One of such pictures, when I investigated, was an old picture from the Rwanda genocide activity in Rwanda. But somehow, these dead bodies in this picture were labeled those killed in the Southern Kaduna religious crisis. There are many videos and pictures like this. Unfortunately, from a very myopic angle, preachers of both faiths, both Christians and Muslims, have been reacting on these fake pictures and giving hate speeches. This is a recipe for religious crisis and war. And since the Senate is the House of the People, I am not requesting for debate, but I'm asking that this Senate pass a note of warning to those who use our cyberspace to create unnecessary tension, and our religious preachers who, without due diligence and investigation, jump on microphones, both imams and preachers and Christians, preaching hate that may necessitate unnecessary crisis. If we don't make a statement as a Senate, this may culminate into a religious crisis that will further deepen the economic recession that we are going through. Mr. President, this is my explanation, and we do hope that Mr. President will use your office to pass a note of caution to those who abuse the cyberspace and our preachers who also use these fake instruments as a yardstick for preaching to the populace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Dinumlai. Again, according to our rules, you know we cannot have a debate on this. But nevertheless, I think the enormity of the topic raised is one that cannot go without a comment. My only appeal, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the entire senators here, is to appeal to all Nigerians, both Christians and Muslims, that we should please be tolerant and refrain. We only have one country. There's no other country we have than this country. Countries like Rwanda up to now have not recovered. And as such, I want to appeal to all of us to please be tolerant and patient. And then for those who are doing this, is to warn them that all of us, nobody in this country will tolerate this use or abuse of the internet and try and use it to incite Nigerians against each other. And we must put them on warning that all action must be taken by all our agencies to find out those and fish out those who are putting these fake and false images which are not existing in this country in order to incite. They must bring an end to this because it has very, very terrible consequences if allowed to go and continue. Once again, I appeal to all of us to please be tolerant at this very trying time. Thank you. Leader of the Senate. Point of order, Senator Mawagwana.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, my name is Senator Mao Aruko Huabunwa. I represent the entire people of Abia North Senatorial District of Abia State. Mr. President, I rise on Order 43. May I read, please?
Let's go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you. By the indulgence of the Senate and the leave of the President of the Senate, a senator may make a personal explanation, although there be no question before the Senate. But no controversial matter may be brought forward, nor may debate arise upon the explanation. The terms of the proposed statement shall be submitted in detail to the President of the Senate when he is leave to make his sought. Mr. President, it's actually with heavy heart and sadness that I make this explanation. Mr. President, it's unfortunate that in recent times we observe how our leaders of tomorrow, the lives of our youth, are being snatched off their life in their prime. How you see agencies or agents that are supposed to protect lives are the ones that are maiming these lives. You recall that last week Thursday, we read all over the papers, we heard about the killing of about 11 youths, 27 being injured and about 56 being arrested for no just cause, for no reason of theirs. Mr. President, we are in a democracy. There you can have diversion of opinion and you have peaceful demonstration as enshrined in our constitution. But if you look at this killing, it's becoming one too many. It happened in Onitsha, it happened in Enugu, it happened in Asaba, now it's happening again in Port Harcourt by the same people who are meant to protect life and property. Life and property. Mr. President, I believe that our security agencies, especially police, are trained in a way to contain civil unrest, protest, or rally. Look at what is happening in America and the whole world all over. People are protesting. You've never had where a lethal weapon is being used on the people. But here, instead of calling the people to a roundtable conference to discuss and to sort out what their problems are, the security agents are using lethal weapons to kill innocent souls. Mr. President, I think as a Senate, it behoves on us to call the security agencies to order, because this youth in no way have they breached any section of our constitution, because the Constitution of the Republic of Nigeria, section 40, allows for peaceful assembly and diverse perspective of opinion. So, having said, I want to move by the indulgence of this House and your permission, Mr. Senate President, that we should call the security agency order and ask the committee on Senate Committee on Police and indeed security to investigate this issue, especially now that they are accusing, the police is coming up to say that we didn't kill any person, but it's very clear and we are seeing it. So that let the police, committee on police and the security committee on national security to please, I'm seeking the indulgence to ensure that to set up a committee to look at these issues. Mr. President, I have made this explanation And I think it's important that we should look at this issue seriously because it's becoming one killing too many. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Mau. As you know, you came under 43, which there cannot be debate, and for which there cannot be debate, there cannot also be a motion following that. We all share your concerns, truly, because as in a democratic setting, we must all respect human rights in these issues. I'm sure the chairman of the National Security, of course, is here, is also listening, and I'm sure we'll have taken notes of these observations. Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the first business of the day is the presentation of the report of the Committee on Customs and Excise on the Nigerian Customs Service Management Act, Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2017. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Hope Uzodinma, Chairman of the committee, to move the motion for the Senate to receive the report.
Senator Hope Uzodinma.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I remain Senator Hope Uzodinma. I represent the good people of Imo West. I rise to move that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee on Customs and Excise on the Nigerian Customs Service Management Act, Repeal and Enactment Bill 2017, SB 247. I so move.
Senator Gbenga Shafa.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Gbenga Shafa, representing Lagos Senatorial District. I rise to second the motion that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee on Customs and Excise on the Nigerian Customs Service Management Act, Repeal and Reenactment, Bill 2017, SB 247. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee on Customs and Excise on the Nigeria Customs Service Management Act, Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2017, SB 247. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Obozumi, come and lay the report. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the second business of the day is the presentation of the reports of the Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petitions in respect of A. Petition from Chinedu Obi Esquire on behalf of Tony Onwara against the Nigeria Customs Service and the Nigeria Ports Authority over Tony Onwara's missing container at Tinkan Island. B. Petition from Owe Boshede Fumilola against the West African Examination Council WAEC for alleged non-issuance of a senior school examination certificate. And C. Petition from Usman Umar against the Nigerian Army for alleged wrongful dismissal from the Army. Mr. President, you wish to invite Senator Samuel Anyanwu, Chairman of the committee, to move the motion for the Senate to receive the reports.
Senator Anyanwu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Sam Anyanwu. I represent Imo East, Imo State. Mr. President, I move that the Senate do receive the reports of the Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions in respect of the following. A. Petition from Chinedu Obi Esquire on behalf of Tony Onora against the Nigerian Customs Service. B. And the Nigerian Ports Authority over Tony Onora's missing container at Tinkan Island. B. Petition from Owoye Bosede Fumilola against the West African Examination Council for alleged non-issuance of a senior school examination certificate. And C. Petition from Usman Omar against the Nigerian Army for alleged wrongful dismissal from the Army. I so move.
Senator Tijani Kara.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Tijani Hayakaura. I represent Zamfara Senatorial District. I rise to second that the motion moved by distinguished Senator Ayam on item 1A, B, and C. I so second. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do receive the reports of the Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petition in respects of petitions 2A, B, and C, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Ayam, nay report. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is a motion requesting the Senate to consider the request of Mr. President C&C for the confirmation of the nomination of Mr. Agatise Eredua for appointment as Executive Director, Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation, NDIC, in accordance with Section 5(4) and A3 of the NDIC Act, Cap N 102 Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004. Mr. President, distinguished senators, the purpose of this motion on the order paper is for the request of Mr. President C&C to be referred to the relevant committee for further legislative action. I therefore move that the Senate do consider the request of Mr. President C&C for the confirmation of the nomination of Mr. Agatise Eredua for the appointment as Executive Director, Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation, NDIC.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion as moved by the leader.
Yes.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do consider the request of Mr. President C&C in the confirmation of the nomination of Mr. Agatise Eredua for reappointment as Executive Director, Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation, NDIC, in accordance with Section 5(4) and A3 of the NDIC Act, Cap N102 LFN 2004. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The request is sent to Committee on Banking. Report back in 2 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day is the second reading of the Appropriation Bill 2017. Distinguished senators will recall that Mr. President C&C presented the 2017 budget to a joint session of the National Assembly on Wednesday, 14th December 2016, and in accordance with the Standing Order 92(1)(b), the 2017 Appropriation Bill is deemed to have been read the first time by virtue of the presentation of the bill to a joint session of the National Assembly. Mr. President, with your permission, I move that the Appropriation Bill 2017 be read a second time.
Leader, you can lead the debate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, permit me to lead the debate on the general principles of the 2017 Appropriation Bill, which was laid before this chamber on Wednesday, 14th December 2016 by the President C&C of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The bill is deemed to have been read the first time by virtue of being laid before the joint session of the National Assembly on Wednesday, 14th December 2016. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the bill seeks to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 7,298,507,709,937 naira only, as against the 2016 budget of 6.1 trillion naira. The breakdown of the budget is as follows. A. Statutory transfers, 419 billion 20,648,000 naira only. B. Debt service, 1,663 billion 885,430,499 naira only. C. Recurrent non-debt expenditure, 2,979 billion 151,656,196 naira only. D. Contribution to the Development Fund for Capital Expenditure, 2,058 billion 989,578,536 naira only, exclusive of capital expenditure in statutory transfers. E. Sinking fund for maturing bonds, 177 billion 460,296,707 naira only. The budget, the 2017 budget is predicated on the following assumptions: benchmark oil price of $42.5 per barrel, projected oil production 2.2 million barrels per day, average exchange rate 305 naira per US dollars, projected GDP growth rate 4.37%. Based on these assumptions, aggregate revenue available to fund the budget will be 4.94 trillion naira. This is 28% higher than the 2016 full year projection. The 2017 budget of 7.3 trillion naira with a revenue projection of 4.94 trillion naira will result to a deficit of 2.36 trillion. And there's a correction here, it's supposed to be trillion, not billion. The deficit, which is equivalent of 2.18% of our GDP, will be financed mainly by borrowing, which is projected to be about 2.32 trillion naira. The intention is to source about 1.067 trillion naira from external sources, while the balance of 1.254 trillion naira will be sourced from the domestic market. With the 2017 budget of recovery and growth, the future of this country looks very bright, as the year-to-year growth in capital expenditure demonstrates that this administration's desire to make this country more competitive in order to bring the economy out of recession and into steady growth and prosperity for all. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the 2017 capital budget is designed to align expenditure to long-term objectives, sustainable development as well as fiscal consolidation, inclusive growth and job creation, stabilization of the welfare of Nigerians by focusing more on A, microeconomic stability, B, consolidating on structural reforms, enhancing governance and institutional goals, diversification of the economy with key emphasis on agriculture, investments in priority sectors like solid minerals, and self-sufficiency in food and other products. NDDC 61 billion naira, water resources 85 billion naira, defense 140 billion naira, health 57 billion naira, interior 63 billion naira, and UBEC 92 billion naira. Mr. President, my respected colleagues, in delivering this administration's development objectives, the 2017 budget increased the capital expenditure portion of the budget from 1.8 trillion naira in 2016 to 2.24 trillion, which represents 30.7% of the nation's total budget. In the delivery of critical infrastructure, 100 billion naira has been provided in the Special Intervention Fund that will underpin a new social housing program that is expected to stimulate construction activities throughout the country. Similarly, to fast-track the modernization of our railway system, the allocation of 213.14 billion naira as counterpart funding for the Lagos-Kano, Calabar-Lagos, Ajakuta-Itakpe, Warri, and Kaduna-Abuja railway projects are provided for in this budget. The 2017 budget further seeks to devote a significant portion of the current expenditure to institutions that provide critical government services. Among them are education, 398 billion naira, defense 325 billion naira, health 252 billion naira, interior 482 billion naira. The devotion of this portion of our current expenditure to these institutions will ensure that our teachers, armed forces personnel, doctors, nurses, policemen, firefighters, prison service officers, and many more critical service providers are paid competitively and on time. The 2017 budget seeks to stimulate our national economy, making it more competitive by focusing on infrastructural development, delivery of inclusive growth, and prioritizing the welfare of Nigerians to 1, safeguard lives and property, 2, equipping farmers with the right tools, technology, and techniques, 3, empowering and enabling minds to operate in a safe and secured environment, and 4, training of our youth through revival of our vocational institutions to ensure they are competitive enough to seize the opportunities that will arise from this economic revival. The administration also introduced new initiatives in the 2017 budget. These initiatives are a new social housing program, 100 billion naira provision for a new social housing program towards a 1 trillion naira fund. B, special economic zone projects, 50 billion naira for special economic zone projects to be set up in each of the geopolitical zones to drive manufacturing and export. C, Export Expansion Grant EEG, 20 billion naira voted for the revival of Export Expansion Grant EEG in the form of tax credit. And D, recapitalization of Bank of Industry BOI and Bank of Agriculture BOA, 50 billion naira provision to support these development finance institutions to support micro, small, medium-scale enterprises. These new initiatives will support economic diversification and inclusion in our growth drive. The budget is designed to stimulate and attract private sector capital and spending. The target of the 2017 budget is to take Nigeria out of recession, create sustainable, inclusive growth and prosperity for all Nigerians in line with the change agenda of this administration. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I believe that all the proposals in this budget are laudable and are tailored to meet the critical needs of this country at this point of our democratic evolution and economic situation. I therefore urge you, all my distinguished colleagues, to support the second reading of this bill and commit it to the committees for detailed consideration. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Senator Abaribe.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. I also today have the honor and privilege on this day of disinfectants and deodorants to look at this budget. Well done. Mr. President, this is indeed a budget.
Sorry, just a second. Chief Whip, you play the role as timekeeper this afternoon. 5. Go ahead, Senator Abaribe.
Thank you, Mr. President. This, like I said, is a budget that we, like the French will say, plus ça change, plus ça même chose. The more things change, the more they remain the same. I have not seen anything good or different or absolutely different from what has always happened here. A budget of 7.3 trillion and a capital expenditure of 2.24 trillion and a borrowing of 2.4 trillion. If we're going to borrow as much as what we're going to spend on the capital expenditure, are we really having a budget, or we're having something that we're playing around with? So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, something needs to give here. And I want to say, a particular type of adage says that in the country of the blind, that the one-eyed man is king. But one very good musician in Nigeria called Fela Anikulapo Kuti asked this question: if everybody is blind, how we don't know that their one-eyed man actually has an eye? So it looks to me, sir, today that we are going in a direction of the blind leading the blind. And I'm going to explain it, sir. And I'm just going to take only one example, the State House budget. In the State House budget, it says here, 123 million to buy catering equipment and materials. I don't know. Did they throw away the one they did last year? They spent 94 million last year to buy catering equipment. They're coming back again to buy another catering equipment. What are they doing in that State House that they're always buying catering equipment? I don't know. Something in the State House budget is even very, very funny. They have welfare for 209 million, honorarium and sitting allowance for 556 million. And we want to ask, if you're going to spend 765 million for honorarium and welfare, is that a university where they're paying people to come and sit there? I thought that is a State House. I don't understand this type of provision that is in there. So we must also ask ourselves, for those in that State House who were claiming that we in this National Assembly were buying vehicles, there's a provision for almost, how many? 5 BMW cars. And they say we don't need vehicle, but they are buying for themselves. What are they doing with it? Of course, 5 Toyota Land Cruisers. That same place. And we're going around and asking. They're also buying computers and equipment. And we want to ask, every year, this our budget will come with computers. Now we have more than 200 million for computers. All computers, what are they doing with the computers? The one they bought last year, did they throw them away? And so that's why I said that the more things change, the more they look the same. And we want to know who is leading who here. And that's why I'm asking, Mr. Leader, I have seen your every good thing that you have written here. And you have to come back to come and tell Nigerians, this thing that you have written here, that this budget is designed to stimulate. How are you going to stimulate by driving away private sector? You want to borrow 30% of this budget. Who will lend this money to you? And if there's no borrowing, that means that no, this budget will not also be implemented. And so we now come down to the fact of implementation. Of course, if you're unable to get any money, how are you going to implement? And then we're going to end up again coming back next year saying the same thing. And so, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I've said again, and let me reiterate, I have seen nothing new in this budget. I have seen exactly the same thing that was happening last year. Thank you, Mr. President.
DSP.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues. I think we've made progress from 2016 budget process. So I believe we started well this year. In 2017, we did not witness any missing budget. So what we are discussing today is what was presented by the President. And we've talked about them 10. We've considered it, we've passed it. And there was no need for harmonization with the House of Reps. So we agreed with them. And of course, in the course of doing so, all the information and documents required from executive were provided. So I believe we have started very well. My prayer is that we should also end the budget process the much we have started. I have to say this because the lizard jumped down from a very considerable height and said, and if nobody praises him, he will praise himself. So I believe we are doing well. And to add, sir, I think there's also improvement arising from a committee which the Senate President set up to modify the budget process. We've come up with a template that will encourage an early presentation of the budget, and which of course will be followed, or rather will also have some level of consultation before the presentation of the budget. We've also come up with a template that will enable budgets to be passed in due time, and that will also encourage the civil society participation and indeed a public hearing. So we're indeed making progress. Distinguished colleagues, I will therefore limit my further contribution to a few areas. One is the poverty reduction strategy. I have a problem with the social intervention program where some people will be paid 5,000. The mode of generating those names for me is shrouded in mystery. Today we are not sure who are these people, and we're even told that this will be done in segments. Some people will receive for 18 months, after which they will go, and another set of people will now be introduced on the list. My problem with this is that it is not sustainable. I support a program that will be sustainable through tax regime in which we all contribute to ensure that everybody will have some money to go home with at the end of every month. This is what is done all over the world. But to put money in the budget to pay people 5,000 for doing nothing, and those people, they are not even sure that they receive it after a few months, I believe it's not the best way to reduce the poverty. We must find a way to include everybody on a very sustainable manner. The money we are spending in paying this 5,000 can be better be applied in the provision of industries. I was chairman of the Senate Committee on Governmental Affairs at some point, and I worked with SMIDA. We came up with a program, we did a study, and it was shown that every local government in this country can have a product they can produce. We call it one local government, one product. If we apply this money in making sure that there's one industry, at least all the local government, that will be more sustainable than giving people some 5,000. Some of these names are only existing in our own imaginations. So I believe that the proper thing to do is to ensure that we have industries in every local government so that people will be get employed, the GDP will improve, and the life expectancy will also improve. The other issue is the issue of the employment generation and the diversification of the economy. A lot of emphasis are being put on agriculture. I don't have a problem with agriculture. But if you look at the statistics all over the world, those who engage in agriculture, who feed their nations, they are less than 5%. So if you are talking about increasing the employment level, the modern agriculture cannot support it because all have been mechanized. So we need to find alternative means of engaging our youths who are coming out of school. And most of them are not very interested in agriculture, so we must admit that. So what happens in other places is that it is ICT, it is industrialization. Today, Kenya is programming to increase the job availability in Kenya by 1 million within the next 1 year, and their strategy is to use ICT. We can do that in Nigeria. India is doing that. Most countries are doing that. In China, it is industrialization. Southeast Asia is ICT. So those are the modern ways of increasing jobs and diversifying economy, not agriculture. The agriculture we have here today is still archaic. And if we want to improve agriculture, we have to mechanize it. And if you mechanize agriculture, we can't take so many people. So if we want to increase the number of people that will be on the employment market, we can put in employment. It's certainly not in agriculture because agriculture will be mechanized. We have to think of ICT, we need to think of industrialization. And I believe going forward too, that we must have a policy that will encourage the issue of reduction in the government expenditure. The cost of running government needs to be reduced. There is no reason why we have to continue to have the number of ministers we have. We need to amend the appropriate laws so that we have the ministers we can afford to have. We need to have the commissioners we have to have. And the issue of the security votes needs to be regulated. It's abused in some quarters. So we need to reduce the cost of governance. Of course, we have to have a rethink on the issue of the presidential system that has proved to be very expensive. Why don't we look at the possibility of going back to the parliamentary system in which most of the ministers are also from the parliament,
In that case, you are reducing the cost of running the government. So we need to do something drastic to ensure that we're able to save money, which we can put into productive sectors that will help to improve the lot of our people. And then finally, I believe that the issue of borrowing needs to be addressed properly, because if we borrow the amount of money we intend to borrow in this budget, presently we have 20% of the budget will go into the service of budget of debt. Now, if you borrow more money, it means that by 2018 it will go up to 30% of the budget in order to service this debt, and that means therefore we have only 70% left. So we need to be cautious in the amount of borrowing that we're undertaking presently. So I believe that the committees that will look into this budget will look into some of these issues, and government will also review some of the policies that will help us to be able to move out of the recession in 2017 to 2018.
Senator Demaye.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My name is Barnabas Kimade. I represent Benue Northeast. Mr. President, the debate on the general principles of the 2017 budget that commenced just a few moments ago is indeed one very major and important step in appraising the 2017 budget for the purpose of ensuring that no matter what is contained in this budget, we also plan for proper implementation of the budget in such a manner that we will improve on what has already been taking place in previous budgets, and indeed what is taking place now in the implementation of the 2016 budget. Mr. President, when we look at the budget assumptions as contained in the MTEV and Fiscal Strategy paper, we see that a lot has been taken into consideration, which makes it imperative that we balance all the implementation along with the assumptions that we put in place in drafting the budget in the first place. Looking at the macroeconomic performance, the revenue projections, expenditure, and the debt profile, we see that attempt has been made to carefully balance this budget in a manner that even though we are in recession, and even though we do have limitations on the revenue profile, we can still balance the borrowing with the revenue in such a manner that we do not go overboard. And I believe that if we look at this carefully, we find out that at the borrowing level, we are still below 3% of GDP as far as the figures are concerned. And this is in order. I agree with the DSP when he speaks about making sure that we do not blow borrowing overboard in such a manner that future payments and servicing of debt will swallow the revenue completely. I strongly believe that the redirected investment in productive sector will ensure that our revenue base is broadened, and diversification will now open up the way for more revenue to be attracted into government coffers in such a manner that the debt service will not be completely detrimental to the operation of the budget 2017 and beyond. Mr. President, the details of the budget as given show that the capital budget is about 30% and the recurrent budget is about 40%, and the deductions are also about 30%. This is much better than we've ever had before, because there were times when the recurrent budget was barely 15% of the entire budget. But today we have inched forward up to a point where we in fact can devote up to 30% of this budget for capital expenditure. And I think this is a plus for this administration. when we look at budget specifics, and I like to contain myself within the new innovations within this budget, and this is the provisions for provision of critical infrastructure. The 100 billion assigned in this budget for promotion of the housing sector is very, very novel, and I think it's a step in the right direction. My comments, though, in this respect is that the implementation must be planned in a manner that all stakeholders involved have their hands on the deck to ensure that we do not have a closed decision-making where policy is administered in MDAs in a manner that the majority of stakeholders are left in the cold and do not understand what is actually happening. Because the actual provision we have in the budget today just says 100 billion to promote infrastructure, especially in the housing sector. But no details are provided. We must ensure, therefore, that the details provided tend to bring everybody on board to ensure that we actually have a success of this. Because when you look at the recapitalization of the banks, only the Bank of Agriculture and Bank of Industries are specifically spelled out in this respect. Of course, we do know that there is a development bank also being started and floated at this moment, and government must definitely fund it. But they are completely quiet about mortgage institutions and the mortgage bank. And this is an area where recapitalization of the Federal Mortgage Bank is also very vital to ensure that you rejuvenate the mortgage market and increase expenditure in the housing sector to promote the housing industry in Nigeria. This is one of the very few areas that you can actually boost the economy and also increase employment of artisans and young people tremendously. So I believe that when this budget comes to the committee level, we will need to look at provisions like this in order to ensure that we bring on board institutions that have been left moribund, like a Federal Housing Authority and like Federal Mortgage Bank, which is not being funded properly, and ensure that we have an effective implementation of this budget. Finally, Mr. President, looking at the capital budget performance for 2016, you will notice that up to this moment, even though releases are within the region of 50 to 60%, performance itself is still lingering around 20% because of the procurement procedure. We have attempted to amend the procurement law here to ensure more speedy implementation of procurement, but that is not working up to this moment. I do believe that we must take steps to ensure that we improve on the procurement procedure in order that budget performance can be more speedily accomplished. I thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the opportunity to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Rozoko.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Rose Oko. I represent Cross River North. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me make some few comments on the principles underlying this budget. First of all, let me look at the issue of the benchmark. Mr. President, because of global trends and the activities of OPEC, it will be wise to review the benchmark upwards to $45 per barrel. If we did this, it will reduce the budget deficit of 2.3 billion that we have now, or trillion that we have now, as that will be reduced by over 600 billion naira. Mr. President, let me also add that the excess of these funds, we should begin to look at a situation where this excess is properly appropriated through legislation. In this government of change, it is bewildering that we will still continue to run an excess crude account that is unknown to the Constitution and that we do not know what it's used for. We do hope that when Section 162 of the 1999 Constitution is amended, that there will be proper legislation to ensure that the excess is properly used. So what we are saying is that the benchmark should be increased to $45, as that will reduce the budget deficit that we have. Let me also look at the issue of the oil production output of 2.2 million barrels per day. That is appropriate, and we do believe that with some of the measures that are being taken right now in that sector, that the activities of the militants in the Niger Delta could be curtailed. For instance, the provision for amnesty has been increased from 20 billion in 2016 to 60 billion in 2017. We do believe that with intensive work in the area of agitations, of curtailing agitations in that sector, that we should be able to meet this target of 2.2 million barrels per day. Even though in 2016, this target could not be met, because as at October, we had only arrived at 1.7 million barrels per day. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me also briefly look at the issue of the exchange rate. This is because the exchange rate alone is part of the reasons why we have spiraling inflation. As of today, inflation is about 18-point-something%. Now, the foreign exchange, the difference between the official rate and the parallel market, as well as even the fact that there's a third exchange rate to things like pilgrimages and all that, is fueling inflation. Because we are an import-dependent economy where the cost of production and the cost of goods is very high. So if we do not do anything to address the issue of the exchange rate, inflation will continue to remain high. And the issue of interest rates as a factor for inflation is perhaps right, but not all of it. And the interest rate should be brought down so as to service the real sector of production and agriculture. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me also look at the issue of district financing that some of my colleagues have already addressed. Now, there are no clear sources of deficit financing in the budget. There is talk of external borrowing and internal borrowing, domestic borrowing. In 2016, external borrowing was virtually nil. And there is no reason for us to believe that there will be any progress in that direction. The domestic borrowing was about 52%. So going forward, we should be provided with clear sources of financing the deficit so as to know whether we would actually meet the targets for the 2017, revenue targets for the 2017 budget. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, going forward in financing our deficit, we may begin to look at the issue of at the sources like the pension funds, which has some 6 trillion, and the capital market, which has some 9 trillion. We do believe that if we have a plan that where we have funds tied to projects, critical infrastructural projects, where there are sources of payments, we do believe that we'll be able to access funds from the capital market and access funds from the pension fund. Mr. President, finally in closing, let me say that budget implementation is very critical. Let me agree with my colleagues, support the position of my colleagues, that we must be able to implement this budget for it to make sense to our people. We must be able to get the MDAs, first of all, to let us know to what extent the 2016 budget has been implemented so as to know what to do in 2017 and to stop the repetition of projects within the budget year in, year out. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Senator Lidani.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Joshua Lidani. I represent the state. I rise to commend the authors of this budget, that is the President of the Federal Republic. And in commenting on this budget, I would like to issue some points of commendation and also some points of caution. On the first point of commendation is the issue of the capital allocation, which is about 30.7%, which is very commendable indeed. In a state of recession, there is a need for government to take steps that will help in reflating the economy. And by allocating this chunk amount for capital projects, I think it will go a long way in helping bringing us out of recession and give the necessary growth that will be required. Secondly, the amount also allocated for infrastructural development is also very commendable. A lot of amount has been allocated for power, roads, railways, and other transport infrastructure. If allocation is given for these projects and it's faithfully implemented, it will go a long way also in promoting growth, as it will generate a lot of activities. It will have a serious ripple effect, and it will help in bringing us out of the woods. The third issue is the allocation for the Special Intervention Program, which is about 500 billion. In a state where citizens are complaining there is hunger in the land, the economy is going bad, the prices of goods has gone up, there's a need for us to develop a social conscience that will look at the sufferings of these people and provide palliatives that will help them cushion the effect of the harsh economic realities that we are facing. So the allocation of 500 billion for this social intervention is very commendable indeed. Also commendable is the allocation, the unprecedented allocation of the sum of 100 billion to the judiciary. It is unprecedented because no government in the past has ever allocated such an amount to the judiciary. Considering the recent developments, that is the invasion of the houses of some judges of the Supreme Court and the Federal High Courts, I think this is a welcome relief because it will help in healing the wounds that has been inflicted on this unpopular course of action. Not only that, it will also serve to enhance the independence of the judiciary. For long we have been crying about independence of the judiciary. We cannot have independence of the judiciary if we do not have the financial independence. And by allocating this amount, I think it will help go a long way in ensuring that the judiciary is properly funded and they are able to perform their functions without any problem. So I like to commend the President for this gesture. But the budget has its drawbacks as well. The first issue I'd like to raise is the issue of sectoral allocation, that is the allocation to various ministries. The allocation by sector, if not carefully handled, is capable of derailing the good intentions of the government in providing for funds for this budget. We have talked about diversification from oil revenues, and therefore if we are talking about diversification, what should we diversify into? We have talked about diversifying into agriculture and also solid minerals. So if we are diversifying into agriculture and solid minerals, what provision have we made in these sectors? For the agricultural sector, we have only made provision of 91 billion, which to me is grossly inadequate. And scandalous is the allocation given to solid minerals, which is just about 12 billion. If we are talking about solid minerals as an alternative to oil, we should allocate a huge sum of money that will invigorate that sector so that we have an alternative, we have an option that we could fall back on without unduly relying on oil revenues. And then the social intervention too is also another area. It's well intentioned, but we have allocated amounts that includes things like school feeding. To me, it's not necessary for the federal government to engage itself in feeding primary school students. Item 30 of the second schedule to the Constitution places primary school education in within the responsibility of the state governments. The federal government has no business in funding primary school feeding. And then thirdly, sir, the allocation for infrastructure generally, although well-intentioned, but we need to take time and see what are really our problems. Is it the power sector? Is it roads? Is it railways? If it is power sector, let us devote a substantial amount of money to the power sector. Let us do all that is required to be done. Let us downplay the others and prioritize the power sector so that Nigeria should be known for doing something well. Instead of spreading our resources thinly and we end up doing nothing, doing not one thing at all. Let us not be jack of all trades and master of none. Let us devote a substantial amount of money to the power sector, and then after we have done with that, then we can go back to the other sector.
Thank you very much. Senator Adokwe.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Suleiman Adokwe, National South Senatorial District. My concern about the budget this year is the concern of all of us, both in the legislature and the executive, which is the concern to deal with the recession at hand. This budget is expected at the end of the day to reverse the recession that has bedeviled this country since last year. And we are all agreed that we devoted quite a substantial number of days in this hallowed chamber to point out what economic activities ought to be undertaken in order to reverse the recession. And up to the moment of speaking, we are yet to see what is the roadmap from the executive side to deal with the recession. It is hoped that this budget will address all those issues. But I think a few statistics need to be considered if this budget is actually addressing the recession issue. Some of the oversight functions that we undertook before this budget was laid indicate that this government is doing very well in terms of capital releases. And if you are doing very well in terms of capital releases, it means that that should impact on the economic environment. But unfortunately, it is not doing so for the simple reason that it is not much money that is actually being released. If you actually look at the total allocations in the budget to the tune of 7.2 trillion, we are talking of just about $24 billion. And we have had budgets in the past that were in the total of 30 billion or more. And what we are dealing with now is just about 24 billion. If you consider the fact that the available revenue to even service the budget is just about 5 trillion naira, that again is just about $16 billion. $16 billion in 2017 is very small money. It cannot go far. And you consider also, as one of my predecessors highlighted, the exchange rate itself of $305 naira per dollar. If you convert that, you discover that the budget in real terms is not much money. And then if you consider also the difference between the official exchange rate and the parallel market, we are talking of the need for much more money than we are asking in the budget. Because if you are to achieve the target of, say, $24 billion, in the parallel market exchange rate, you will require about 11 trillion to have actual value for our $24 billion. Because no matter how much capital you release to the various ministries and departments, they are going to the open market to do their procurement. And these procurements are done based on the parallel market exchange rate. This is the real problem, because as we are saying, in 2016, about 51 to 60% releases were made. But there is no impact because whoever is going to do procurement is dealing with the prices at the parallel market rate. This is really the crux of the matter. We need absolutely to sit down and know exactly what to do with this exchange rate. Because if we don't have a consistent policy that will reverse this exchange rate, we can never achieve serious economic impact in the budget implementation. And then finally, let me also say that no matter how fine a budget is, the bulk of the budget is allocated to the social sector and public works, and these are not productive sectors. Once you are doing that, everywhere in the world, if you want to lean the budget more on the side of social sector, the people must pay taxes for it. And therefore it means we have to devise a better way of collecting our taxes and collecting more than we are collecting now. Most of the taxes that are collected by other agencies are returned with them, and we don't know how they are spending it. If we do not generate more taxes to pay for the social sector, but their hard-earned foreign exchange is dedicated to social sector, it will not help us a lot. That is why we are borrowing more. Almost 30% of our budgetary need is going to borrowing. That is not good enough for an economy that is in recession. You cannot borrow more money only to spend it on the social sector, like somebody has said, giving 5,000 or feeding. These are not really productive sectors, and we must find a better way of dealing with this recession. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator, yep.
This Senate appointed me the Vice Chairman of INEC, and I must leave now. Thank you. So I want you to know respectfully, I'm not running away. I'm going to do another job that you gave me.
Distinguished Senator Nada, you take over the seat of the. Okay, I can see the deputy will be rushing in, so that's fine. I have accepted. All right, you carry on. Senator Shitu, Senator Tazi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Senator Chukwu Kotaze. I represent the good people of Enugu North Central District of Enugu State. Mr. President, last year we had a budget of 6.1 trillion naira. This year we are having 7.3 trillion naira. And I said last year that is not the making of a bogus budget that matters. It's being very factual. We don't need to have a big budget. We need to have the type of budget that speaks about the current situation in this country, a country in recession. And I said last year, and I'm repeating myself, the essence of having a supplementary budget is to make up for shortfalls. That we have to be realistic with the main budget. If by happenstance that the federal inland revenue and other MDSA generating revenue make enough resources, we can always come back for a supplementary budget. But you want to give a semblance that everything is well. You want to borrow in order to finance a lot of things. It doesn't show we are in a recession. We have just come back to it again this year, and it's not something very realistic for some of us here to keep harping on that. But I want to say, beyond that, last year we had the budget provision
for Ministry of Agriculture was 65 billion. This year, and I criticized it last year, because we said we want to move from the oil revenue to non-oil and create jobs for our people. And we had a 65 billion. And I said that was not a good way of doing it. This year we have moved to 91 billion. It shows the people in that area are beginning to hear to some of the inputs we're making here. If we really have to do something, agriculture, like we have 91. 91 is not even enough for for this country, but at least is a marked improvement from what we had last year. Because agriculture, if we invest in agriculture seriously in this country, we will not only provide enough food for ourselves, we will also stop the depletion of our foreign reserves in the importation of food outside there. We need to encourage our people, encourage Nigerians to get into farming seriously. And if we are doing so, we will also be creating jobs for our people and the young ones that are there without looking for something. Then you look at the education. This year we have 50 billion for education in this country. I wonder, for a country as such as Nigeria, and we are condemning that, we're all saying that the level of education in this country is nothing to write home about. And you are saying 15 billion for the education in this whole country. It means we are budgeting for illiteracy, Mr. President. We are not making any headway in getting things done. And people who are there have to look at this seriously. 50 billion it cannot be the budget of this country for education. And we expect to get anything out of it. No wonder we have people who are half-baked people who are from the university. People, graduates who cannot express themselves. Graduates who cannot write an application for a paid employment. We have people who are just there roaming around and getting things done. I want to also say that when they have in the budget 140 billion for defense, 150 billion for defense, Mr. President. And you are for employment, for Minister of Employment. How much do you have there? The only security we have in this country is when we have the youth who are employed. If you keep putting so much money to fight this without looking at the cost, you are looking at the effect instead of the cost. We are going nowhere, Mr. President. We have to check this kind of money we are putting in this. If we give it for job creation, if we do it for job creation, we'll have made things done. Well, I keep my gunpowder dry when we come back for the major debate of the budget. Thank you so much, sir.
Senator Raju Razaki.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I am Senator Fatima Raju Razaki. I'm representing Ekiti Central Senatorial District. Well, it may be noted that the projected revenue from the non-oil revenue has declined in 2017 compared to that of 2016. This as a result of the current domestic economic and physical environment. On the whole, the revenue projection is likely to increase because of the ongoing negotiation with militants in the Niger Delta and the OPEC regulation in price of crude oil sales. The 2017 budget estimate has made significant increase in budgetary allocation of some organizations, notably the National Judicial Council, the Niger Delta Development Commission, the Universal Basic Education, though the budget of the National Assembly remains same as in the 2016 budget, that is 115 billion. The proposed statutory transfer to the National Judiciary Council is increased to 70 billion, approved in 2016 budget of 100 billion in 2017. The increase in the funding of the National Judicial Commission is to enhance independence of the judiciary and to allow them to effectively discharge their judicial functions. On the capital expenditure, the proposed capital expenditure component in 2017 budget estimate, inclusive of capital expenditure of statutory transfer, is 3.7% as against 30% in 2016. The distribution of capital expenditure across the 6 broad pillars of government activities indicated that infrastructure has 56%, followed by governance and security. The allocation of more than 50% of the capital budget to infrastructure is consistent with this year's budget. This year's budget theme, Budget of Recovery and Growth. The capital expenditure is aimed at good governance and providing enabling environment for economic recovery growth. Ministry of Power, Works and Housing. The proposed budget of the March Ministry in 2017 is 564 billion compared to 477 billion in 2016. The proposed budget allocation to the ministry is consistent with the 2017 budget theme Recovery and Growth. It is therefore necessary for the relevant committees of the Senate to carry serious oversight of the ministry in order to deliver on good governance and accountability. Minister of Agriculture, under Minister of Agriculture, the agricultural sector is proposed to receive 92 billion, showing an increase over the 2016 approved allocation. Yet, the net 2 billion represent 1.7 only, as against the United Nations advice of allocating at least 2% to the federal budget to agriculture. I therefore call on the relevant committees of agriculture in the Senate to ensure a good interface with the executive to increase the proposed allocation to 2%. The increase will assist the government in its drive towards diversifying the economy through agriculture, as well as achieving domestic self-sufficiency in food production in Nigeria. Minister of Education. A total of 540.9 billion is proposed to the ministry, both recurrent and capital expenditure. The government should find means to support education optimally. Education, as we know, is on the concurrent list, and therefore the federal government should look towards the application of those constitutional provisions. It is indeed essential to mention some significant features of the 2017 budget, which includes the war against insurgency and the fight against corruption. The allocation to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, which is being increased from 10 billion in 2015 to 17 billion in 2017, demonstrate the commitment of the present administration to the fight against corruption in the country. Senate President, distinguished colleagues, as we are the representatives of the people, we must be seen to exercise our constitutional mandate of ensuring that approvals given are implemented to the satisfactions of Nigeria. As legislators, we must not fail to expose any corruption that we see in the course of performing our duty. With this, I strongly urge you to support that the bill be read 7 times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. I think that was the last person on the list for today. We'll, of course, continue this again tomorrow. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, having concluded today's proceedings on the order paper, I move that the Senate do adjourn until tomorrow, Wednesday, 25th of January at 10 a.m. prompt. I so move.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to support the motion, or secondly, that the Senate do adjourn till tomorrow at 10 a.m. to continue the debate on the budget. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, before I put the motion, just two announcements. One, on the list for tomorrow, we have over 30 names. So please, one, that we start on time, and two, we just try and be a bit, a bit more prudent with our times, so that I'm sure everybody can have an opportunity tomorrow to say one or few words. That's one. Second announcement is the ad hoc committee on the state of human relief efforts in the Northeast. Membership has Senator David Umaru, Senator Abaribe, Senator Yusuf, Senator Matthew Rugidi, Senator Baro Jibrin, Senator Buhari Abdul Fattah, and Sir Attai Adoko. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate adjourn to Wednesday, 25th January 2017 at 10 a.m. say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The Senate is hereby adjourned to Wednesday, 25th January 2016 at 10 a.m. prompt.